Everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and these are your sun and rising sign horoscopes for the month of March 2020. So in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the air signs, Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini. And we'll start with Libra. So I'm going to put the chart up on the screen so you can see it. There are two major sets of transits this month that we're going to be looking at, a couple happening in the first 10 days of the month, and the second set of transits are happening in basically the last 10 days of the month. That's how I had it organized. So in this, we'll start with Libra, and the very beginning of the month, the big transit happening for you is Venus, your ruling planet, is in a square to Saturn, who is in your fourth house. So this is highlighting the seventh house and fourth houses, two very powerful angular houses in your chart, and the topics of relationships, as well as home, family, parents, roots, and ancestral karma. Venus square Saturn is not easy. It usually brings a little bit of difficulty, stress, or tension into the home or into relationships in this case. But it can also be a symbol of deepening commitments, seriousness, and sometimes difficulty that it comes with rewards. You know, fine wines are not made without a lot of time. And so, you know, time, depth, seriousness, commitment, focus, discipline that bring rewards, both in relationships and related to the home or family, could also be seen this month. At the very beginning of the month, you might see some of those themes coming up. The interesting thing is that right after Venus separates from Uranus, or excuse me, from Saturn, gave it away, Venus goes right into the conjunction with Uranus in your 8th house. Now you're going to see that by the 9th. And as this is happening in your 8th house, Venus brings a very different set of qualities and themes compared to how it starts with the square to Saturn. Venus-Uranus is electric, a little bit more erratic or eccentric, original, creative, but sometimes loves freedom and doesn't love to be committed or is sort of defiant and again, sort of rebellious. So in the 8th house, this could mean, for example, that you're wanting to be free of some kind of obligation or debt that you have to someone else. Or it could mean that someone else is wanting to be free of some kind of debt or obligation that they have to you. Emotionally, karmically, you might see the clearing of debts in very interesting and synchronistic ways. On the other hand, you also have to be aware of the potential for erratic, and disruptive events relative to relationships, love, sexuality, and so forth. So those are a few things to watch out for. Venus-Uranus can also be a blast of creative energy that is, really nice and can, if you're a creative person, or if you're in a relationship and you are in need of some kind of romantic awakening, the spark being rekindled, this can be a really nice transit for that as well. So the other major transit that's happening at the very beginning of the month is going to be the full moon that's coming through in Virgo on the 8th into the 9th, while at the very same time, realize that I don't have my outer planets plugged in fully. Okay, there we go. While at the same time, Neptune and the Sun are conjoining in Pisces in the 6th house. Now, these two houses, cadent houses, were called metacosmios by ancient astrologers, which means like worlds in between worlds. They are transitional spaces, and these two houses were home to the malefics, Saturn and Mars in traditional astrology. And so difficult transition that might be upon you this month emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, but it's not without feeling like you are getting clear about something important as well. The Neptune-Sun transit in the 6th can be about the vision of redemption, which means you get an idea, let's say, about something that you need to do in order to heal or grow or be free of something that isn't working, or some sense of inspiration that you get in the midst of difficulty or hardship that's basically telling you how to turn the boat around, or how to turn in the right direction. But it may be born of certain kinds of stresses or difficulties. At the same time, the moon in the 12th house, the full moon in the 12th house, can play on your insecurities, can play on the tendency to be a little bit judgmental. And both of these planetary transits are also a warning not to be dissociative, be careful of drinking or alcohol or drugs or anything that's escapist in nature. The question here might also be about how to change the vision of your life in some area. Maybe it's a small thing, but some shift of vision and approach is needed. And then the practical questions about how to implement that change are being asked by the Virgo full moon. So I like that for, the 7th, 8th, and 9th. I like that tension there. Might be a little stressful, but the those mutable houses, when they come up, they're usually giving us slowly ushering in some kind of shift in our thinking or way of being. And this one I think could be very positive, but it might be born of having to make a change because there's some stress or difficulty in some area that you are, you're getting tired of. You need to change it up somehow. So then we go forward to the later part of the month, and on the 20th, this is when the big this is like the wrecking ball transit of the month. I mean, it is just powerful, I think productive, potentially destructive. It's got a lot of Pluto energy behind it. So we've got a new moon in Aries. Coming through into your 7th. Wait a sec. Yeah, to get that right. Yeah, coming into your 7th house. And then at the same time, we have the spring equinox on the 20th coming in through the 7th house. So the emphasis there is all about relationships, right? It has this feeling of starting something, which is sort of quintessential spring equinox energy, starting something. It's inceptional. And yet it's governed by Mars, which is the god of war and conflict. And where is Mars? Well, during the same time, through the 20th through the 24th, Mars is powering through conjunctions to both Jupiter and Pluto in the 4th house of home and family. So once again, we can see that this dichotomy between relationships on the one hand, partner, spouse, marriage, relationships, home, family, property, parental, ancestral karma, it's very big. And I don't want to say it's negative. Like, I feel like this energy could be very productive. You think about moving in with someone, or deepening a commitment with someone, or deciding to do something cooperatively with someone, or sharing a base of resources and support with someone in order to collaborate and move things forward. All of that, it could be good teamwork this month, basically. But you're also seeing the potential with Mars hitting Jupiter in its fall and Pluto in Capricorn for there to be, explosive, unexpected events that are coming through around the topics of love and family, and some degree of conflict or confrontation. So it's really strong. It's not messing around. The impacts of this will stretch out all the way into the month ahead as well. Now, at the same exact time, the planet Saturn is moving into Aquarius on the 22nd. And that energy is, you're getting a preview of Saturn in Aquarius for a couple of months before Saturn will retrograde back out of Aquarius. And in this case, you're getting a preview of what Saturn's going to be like in your 5th house for a couple of years, where it's going to eventually stay in the 5th house for a couple of years. So the preview in the 5th house is, Saturn moving into the 5th house is deeper karmic reckoning with your children or your kids, if you have them, or with the topics of pregnancy, meaning I'm getting pregnant, I wasn't planning it, or I'm getting pregnant and I'm preparing to be responsible for a new phase in life, or, I'm working on my relationship with my kids, or my kids are going off to school, or I'm an empty nester. But Saturn brings the deeper work of our souls, really. And so the 5th house of children can be indicated here. Or you can look at this and say, okay, this is around the topics of anything related to joy, pleasure, sexuality, fun, creativity. Saturn can help you to become more focused and disciplined and committed to those things. But Saturn can also be kind of a joy kill in the 5th house, and maybe saying like, look, you're now in a space where you have to reckon with, well, I drink too much, or, I have some indulgent pattern or habit that I'm now having to deal with in my body, or something like that. Or on the other hand, you're like, I don't know how to have fun. And so there's a study of some kind happening around, how to have fun in the next couple of years. Anyway, that's just a sneak preview. We'll be talking at length about Saturn changing signs later in the year, because this is you're just getting a little glimpse of it before Saturn turns retrograde and goes back into Capricorn. So that's it for Libras. Let's start over and go to Aquarius. Start over at the beginning of the month. Let's put Aquarius on the ascendant. And for Aquarians this month, so much happening in the 12th house and the 3rd house. That's really where the action is focused. You can see at the very beginning of the month, Venus in Aries, moving through a square from the 3rd house to Saturn in Capricorn in the 12th house. Now, you don't be surprised if you're feeling the need to withdraw or remove yourself from relationships, or if you're dealing with themes of isolation or loneliness. Venus Saturn across this house axis could mean that a relationship is ending, or that you're facing communicative hardships or strain in relationships. It could also mean that you're feeling a little confined or isolated and you need to reach out a little bit more. It could also mean that that there is generally speaking some deepening commitment that's happening in the context of a relationship, but it's probably by means of Venus in the third house. It's probably going to happen because you have to talk about, discuss, or address something a little bit more serious, or come to an agreement about something. You may also be looking at getting in and out of new contracts or agreements in other areas of your life. Right after this energy of Venus to Saturn clears, then Venus goes into Taurus and in your fourth house and immediately conjoins. Whoops, here we go. Immediately conjoins with Uranus. So this is happening by the 9th of the month. Venus-Uranus is, of course, very creative, disruptive, erratic, stresses the themes of independence and originality. And this is happening in your home, your house of home, property, family, living space, parents. It's really interesting to see this because it could mean that something about your living situation is changing, or the environment of your home or relationships in the family are going through a little surprise transformation. Uranus always kind of erratic and surprising. And it could also mean that the need to individuate or, claim greater independence somehow with regard to where you're living or in relation to your family members could also be there. Now, the other transit that's coming through the early part of the month, especially right around the 9th, is going to be seen with the full moon in Virgo in your 8th house. And then here we can see the Sun-Neptune conjunction in your 2nd house. Now, this is highlighting the financial access of your chart. So you're going to see the full moon in the 8th house of other people's money, resources, values, and the Sun-Neptune transit in your 2nd house of money, resources, values, etc. There could be some pretty deep conversations if you're in a relationship going on about budgeting, money, finances, debts, etc. You could also be looking personally at the boundaries that you keep in terms of how much of yourself you give or sacrifice versus what other people give or what other people need. Also questions about what is a practical use of time, money, energy, or resources. What do I want to share and not share? And you could be receiving some kind of inspiration around money, finances, or business, but make sure that it's very practical and that you can implement it in a grounded way, because Sun-Neptune can be prone to delusions of grandeur. So going forward to the 20th of the month, once we get to the 20th, we're going to see the major explosive transit of the month, which is the spring equinox, the sun entering its exaltation in Aries, followed by a new moon in Aries on the 24th. Now, this is inceptional energy, which means it's spring-like, it's birthing energy, it's starting energy. In the 3rd house, that's the place of your mind. It pertains to learning, technology, the thought structures of your life, the paradigm change that could be indicated by a new moon in Aries in the 3rd house. But who is it hosted by? Well, let's put in an arrow here. So it's hosted by Mars, who is exalted in Capricorn in your 12th house, just having gone through from the 20th to the 24th through conjunctions to Jupiter and Pluto. That is a very explosive energy, but unfortunately, it's in a house that also can be very self-destructive. So whatever is on your mind, whatever you're thinking of doing this month, you just want to be really careful that it's not impulsive and sort of destructive, rash, too sudden, and drastic. It's also possible that verbal or mental intemperance or conflicts could get the best of you this month, so you want to be very careful of that. On the other hand, if there's something that you need to do that is just for yourself, that's born of inner self-reflection, and that it's kind of bubbling to the surface, something's bubbling up and you're going, you know what, this is what I need to do. The 12th house can also pertain to things that insights or experiences that we gather in solitude or through a state of inward turning, alone time. And it could be that there's some pretty powerful dynamics coming up in that way. You also have to be really careful of gossip, drama, and people that are basically suddenly lashing out. The 12th house can be a house of hidden enemies. Anyway, it's a pretty dynamic and intense energy for Aquarians. I feel like maybe Aquarians have one of the most challenging relationships to this period of time this month, which is also the most explosive time of the month. So, take good care of yourself. The other thing you're going to notice is that on the 22nd, Saturn is entering your first house, where it's going to stay for several years eventually. You're getting a preview of it. It's going to back out and dip back into the 12th house in Capricorn for a while this year. But a couple of months, starting in March, you're going to get a glimpse of what Saturn in your first house is all about. Well, Saturn in the first house is a very personal time of reckoning, especially for health, mental, psychological, and physical health. It's also a time of a personal crossroads where things are coming to an end and you're faced with the endings of things, where the mature, sober realization that you aren't who you used to be, or the need to take deep inventory of yourself and redirect your life into new commitment. And that you're getting a glimpse of that right after this very powerful, explosive energy coming through between the 20th and the 24th. So it's a great time, Saturn in the first house, to start fresh and to redefine your commitments in the ways that you've been needing to, but maybe haven't. So that's, I think that can be a really positive part of this. This is your ruling planet, after all, coming back to its home sign and house. Let's go back to the beginning of the month, start all over again for Gemini. So we go back to around the 3rd or 4th of the month, and we put Gemini on the ascendant. And we're going to take a look at some of the same transits that are coming through. First of all, Venus. Here's Venus in your 11th house, square to Saturn in your 8th house, if you're a Gemini sun or Gemini rising. And Venus's square to Saturn is, again, it right away, it says Venus in the 11th house of friends and groups and allies, square to Saturn in the 8th house. You may be looking at differing values or conflicts of value in your greater social or kind of group cultural dynamics, groups of friends, religious groups, academic groups, political groups. Wherever you sort of say, these are my people, you may be noticing some pretty stark conflicts or contrasts, or conflicts of interest or contrasts of values that are coming up around this time. At the same time, weirdly, Venus and Saturn can also mean that there are deepening commitments happening and rewards for hard work. You might see that among groups of people or with friends, or that you're benefiting somehow from other people. But it is a time of reflecting upon the agreements and relationships that you have in your greater social life. Okay, then right after that, Venus by the 9th is going to go into a conjunction with Uranus. So there it is. And the conjunction with Uranus is another powerful Venus dynamic at the first 10 days of the month, very different from the Saturn square. Uranus is an erratic rebel. Uranus is a disruptor and an individuator. It shakes up the paradigm. Well, Venus entering the 12th house, conjoining with Uranus, I could see someone, deciding to go out and dance all night and get wasted. Just something that's kind of crazy and erratic and rebellious, but Venusian, involving pleasure and beauty and sensuality, like that. So you got to be careful of that. Maybe a little bit of a self-destructive impulse. I just need to be free, and then hang over the next morning. So be careful of that. But otherwise, this also has the feeling of sort of sudden erratic changes and shifts and revolutions happening in relationships for you. You have to be careful of it being a little self-destructive or involving some drama, but it could also represent a kind of creative breakthrough. Now, around the same time, the 7th, 8th, and 9th, you're also going to see the full moon come through. And this is really big for the mutable signs this month because they're happening in your cardinal houses. For you, the full moon is coming through in Virgo on the 9th, opposite the Sun and Neptune, who will be conjoined between the 7th and the 9th, in Pisces in the 10th house. So the tension is being split between home, family, domestic matters, the practical concerns surrounding those topics. That's Virgo. And then, the visionary, big, imaginative, romantic, sort of otherworldly energy of the Sun Neptune taking place in the career house. So those two are in this real tense dialogue with one another right around the full moon on the 9th, but building up from the 7th through, say, the 10th. So that's the first 10 days of the month, big transits. And then let's go to the 20th. The 20th of the month is where the major like workhouse, powerhouse transit of the month is taking place, 20th to the 24th. Around that time, we see the spring equinox in Aries. We see a new moon in Aries, both in your 11th house of friends, groups, community, again, being highlighted as we discussed earlier. And who is hosting that? An exalted Mars, who is in Capricorn in your 8th house, making conjunctions during the same 4 to 5 day window of time, 20th to the 24th, to Jupiter and Pluto. Now, the 8th house is a place of other people's values, assets, resources, and the 11th house is groups of friends and colleagues and allies. So, needless to say, this transit very simply has the mark of something very new happening. That's the Aries energy and the cardinal energy. But it's forceful, it's powerful, it's productive, it's achievement oriented. And it may tangle you up a little bit in some explosive dynamics around power, dominance, conflicts of value or conflicts of interest, things like that. But I'm trying to be positive about this transit for everyone and thinking, if it's time to make a transformation, put your foot on the gas pedal and just make the transformation happen, or push something forward, that this could really get it done. But, it can be like a bulldozer, and you may, Geminis may be in the position of being at the mercy of other people during this time as well. So at any rate, watch for that. Now on the 22nd, Saturn is also going to top off this entire month of March by entering Aquarius, where it will be in your 9th house now for several years. But it actually, I should qualify that by saying it's dipping into Aquarius for a couple of months, then it's going to retrograde back into Capricorn. Then by the end of the year, it ingresses back into Aquarius, where it will stay for a couple of years. And so you're getting a sneak preview of what the karma of the next couple of years is going to look like with Saturn in the 9th house. It's a time of hard work, labor, deeper soul level karma that's fruiting around, and I say deeper because Saturn moves very slow, so it has a long history behind it, around the topics of religion, spirituality, foreign countries, education, higher education, things like that. So you're going to get a taste for that right around the 22nd as Saturn ingresses. Watch for what topics, 9th house topics, are coming up around that time. So that is what I have for all of you air signs this month. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear from you guys and hear how things are going, hear your stories. I try to cover some of the big general themes for everyone, but the individual stories are always what I'm really interested in. So feel free to come back to this, check in on each of the transits, see how they're doing, and feel free to share your stories. I'd love to hear them. In the meantime, make sure you don't miss my monthly overview of March. I did a whole video just covering all the mundane transits of March, and you might get something out of that as well. So I'll look forward to breaking all of these transits down one by one on my YouTube channel this month, and thanks for watching. Take it easy. Bye.